drinking.
All right, at this time it's my pleasure to introduce today's featured speaker, Joe Schmidt, and we spelt his name right. Joe Schmidt is the sports director and anchor for Channel 5 Eyewitness News. Before coming to KSTP-TV in 1985, Joe worked as a sports director for WBAY-TV in Green Bay, Wisconsin. His career also includes positions as weekend sports anchor for KCRG-TV in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and also WKBT-TV in La Crosse, Wisconsin. Schmidt earned his degree in mass communications from the University of Wisconsin-La Crosse. He has won numerous Associated Press awards and 3 Emmys, including one for outstanding individual performance on camera. While committed to supporting a number of community organizations, the Big Brothers Big Sisters are on the top of Schmidt's list. He is a current board member and past president of the Big Brothers Big Sisters of Greater Minneapolis. In the last 7 years alone, he has helped raise more than $1 million through the annual Joe Schmidt Celebrity Golf Tournament for Big Brothers. Joe is married and the father of 3 young children, and in their free time, the Schmidt family enjoys, you guessed it, sports. Please join me in welcoming Joe Schmidt.
I got to work on that intro. It's longer than my speech. You did leave out my Congressional Medal of Honor. So, just kidding. It's great to be here in Hudson, Wisconsin, and yes, you know, we may be over there in Minneapolis, St. Paul, but we do worry once in a while what happens on this side of the river, because I am a cheesehead after all, as you probably found out in me. Whenever I speak to a group like this, I'm always reminded that, by the way, is this Channel 4 following me here? Channel 10? Okay, good. I just wanted to make sure before I started ripping roads and it wasn't going on their air. No. I'm always reminded when I give a speech that I should really have a moral to my story instead of just getting up here and talking like John. By the way, John, I didn't think that was Gap Kids. I thought that looked more like Fleet Farm. Well, I thought I should have a moral to the story, so I'm reminded when I was a kid in class, the teacher was asking for examples of moral of the story. So one kid raises his hand and he said, when my dad was a little kid, he used to go out and collect soda bottles. He got a penny for each pop bottle he found. You know what? Today he owns that pop factory. Teacher says, well, that's amazing. What's the moral of the story? Kid says, a penny saved is a penny earned. Next kid raises his hand. He goes, my little brother's coming home from the grocery store the other day. Has a basket full of eggs. He slips and he falls and he breaks all the eggs. The teacher says, what's the moral of the story? Kid says, don't put all your eggs in one basket. Third kid raises his hand. He said, my Uncle Harry was in WW2. He was in a foxhole. He looked up. There were 100 Germans coming over the hill. They were all armed and ready to go. Uncle Harry went back down that foxhole, took out a quart of Jack Daniels and chugged it down. Uncle Harry got up and killed all 100 of Germans and didn't have a scratch on him. The teacher says, that's amazing. What's the moral of the story? Kid says, don't mess with Uncle Harry when he's been drinking. So I'll try to have a moral to my story. I was going to bring my good friend Sid Hartman along today, but we all know that it's Thursday, and that's the day he washes Carl Polad's car. True story. Last Wednesday, I'm out at Winter Park with the Vikings, and Sid comes up to me and he goes, Schmidt, I said, what? He goes, I see that you're going to be talking to that Chamber of Commerce thing in Hudson. What do you do that for? They've been after me for 5 years to do that. And I said, well, I wasn't sure I wanted to do it, but they're paying me $1,000. So he goes, really? They're paying you $1,000? So next year's speaker will be Sid. Just kind of give him the check late, By the way, I'll give you a little scoop here because, it's part of my job, but to have scoops. And tonight the lead story on Channel 5 at 6 o'clock is the plastic surgery that Denny Green has had. You see, he had a big bay window installed all the way across his belly. So that's in case we get to the game on Sunday and he's got his head up his butt, he can see. The trouble with that joke in Hudson is I'm not sure who's laughing harder, the Packer fans or the Vikings fans. I got the greatest job in the world. I mean, and my job basically is to go to games. I get free tickets at the games. They feed you free food. This weekend I'm going to Denver, the Mile High Stadium, to watch the Vikings game. We'll stay at a fancy hotel. I mean, the last hotel we stayed at, they had these big fluffy towels that could hardly get my suitcase closed. Yeah, I don't even need a mic, huh? I'm from Seymour, Wisconsin. Did anybody here know where Seymour is?
Excuse me.
Anybody? We got a couple people know where Seymour? Yeah. Well, Seymour's smaller than Hudson. Seymour's so small that we had driver's education and sex education in the same car. That's how small Seymour is. But I do have to confess here, because this is the number one question I get when people find out where I was born and raised. Because Seymour is just about 13 miles from Green Bay. They ask me if I'm a Packer fan or a Viking fan. I grew up the biggest Packer fan in the entire world. We watched it, lived it, died it through the Lombardi era. And one time I'm reminded that we went out to the airport after the Packers had won a championship. And I was just a little kid at the time, and everybody was trying to get the autographs of all the players. And I had no chance. I was too small, but I was pretty smart. So I snuck around the side and noticed that some of the players were leaving out another exit. And I got Vince Lombardi's autograph, and then I got Paul Hornung, and Hornung was ready to sign an autograph for me, and he saw all these other kids coming because they had figured out. Hornung said, "I'll catch you later, kid," grabbed my shoulders and ran out. 20 years later, I was working as a sportscaster at WBAY-TV in Green Bay. I was the play-by-play man on the preseason broadcast. My color man was Paul Hornung. So I threw his picture out in front of him and said, "You owe me an autograph." And I had to tell him the story. So it's kind of funny how it goes around. I came here in 1985, and yes, I was still a Packer fan when I came here, but what happens is the team you cover, you quickly become a fan of, and it kind of goes twofold. One, you get to know the players. I'm down at Winter Park 2-3 times a week, and I get to know the players. Some of the guys you actually like. There's all the bad things you hear about athletes, and you kind of root for. And secondly, believe it or not, my job is a heck of a lot easier if they win than if they lose. Because if you ever go in the locker room after a loss, it is not the place you want to be. Besides it being kind of stinky and smelly and crowded and what have you, you got to go up to an athlete who just fumbled and ask him how come he fumbled. And sometimes that's not real pleasant. So I have, I guess I'm a born-again kind of Viking fan is what happened. So I do like the Vikings. I still have a small part of me that's a Packer fan because I grew up as a Packer fan, and my family's still a Packer fan, but I would have to say I'm a Viking fan now, and I hope I don't get shot on the way out. I stopped at your grocery store on my way in, and I saw that they had 2 rows of Packer cookies and 2 rows of Vikings cookies. I thought that was pretty fun. I want to go there Sunday and see what's left. By the way, Mary Claire, correction. I went to the University of Highlands at La Crosse. That's right. When I was at La Crosse, yeah, I'm the only guy in the world who will admit.
She just got it.
Is that the one who lives on that little houseboat down there? I'm the only broadcaster in the world who will admit why I got into broadcasting, and it's the absolute truth. I got into broadcasting because I thought it'd be a great way to meet girls. And I used to have trouble with girls. You see, when I was in college, every single girl I brought home my mom didn't like. So finally I got smart, and I went out and I found a girl who kind of looked like my mom, who dressed like my mom, walked like my mom, actually even cooked a little bit like my mom, and I brought her home. It was great. My mom loved her. But now I had a new problem. My dad couldn't stand her. I eventually, in my broadcasting career, I eventually did marry a Minnesota girl, and I have 3 Minnesota kids. And as a matter of fact, the other day I came home and told my wife, I said, honey, pack your bags. I won the lottery. She goes running upstairs and she said, what should I pack for warm or cold? I said, pack them all. You're out of here. I should really say about my wife. I got good memories of Hudson. Our 9th anniversary a year ago, we stayed up at the Phipps Inn up here for our 9th anniversary and spent the day in Hudson and had a real nice time. So I'm just teasing her. She's not here for that. She's not here to defend herself. She says to me, she calls me up and she says, hey, I got good news and bad news on the new car. I said, oh yeah, what's the good news? She says, the airbags work. So anyway, when you get married 10 years, you can tell those jokes about your wife. I think that's the way it works out. I didn't know whether or not to talk about the Vikings, the Packers, or what have you, but I thought I'd talk about a couple of things and then open it up to questions, just because I'm sure that you want certain specific questions answered. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Vikings because it's a team that I cover. And I know as Vikings fans, many people are pretty frustrated as to what's happening this year. But what really happened to this football team is they lost their swagger. And it's kind of hard to put a title on it, but they just did not have that killer instinct that they had the year before. And part of it was Randall Cunningham. And it's very interesting because I'm out there so often, you got certain people in the team that will confide in you and tell you actually what's really going on with the team. And the offensive lineman said that Randall Cunningham was basically in a trance when he went into the huddle. He would call the play with no sense of urgency, like nothing was happening, walk up to the huddle and run the play as if it was a practice instead of having a game. He lost that little intangible that great athletes have. Jeff George, who everybody in the team hated in training camp because of his attitude and his cockiness, everybody likes now because he has that swagger. He gets in the huddle, he calls a play, he tells the guys what's going to happen. He'll yell at somebody if they miss an assignment. And believe it or not, the team is responding to it. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens as the team now plays a little better team this week in Denver. But I think the Vikings will eventually win 9 or 10 games and make the playoffs. And at that stage, they have enough talent to make a run this year. And maybe without the expectations they had last year, they will this year. But I do happen to think that team in Green Bay is pretty good too. What's that, quarterback? I'll tell you what, I've seen a lot of athletes over the years, and since I don't have to pay to get into games, I would pay to see Brett Favre play quarterback. Man, he is unbelievable. The stadium issue, I've got other breaking news today. It's going to be built in Hudson. Yeah, they're going to put it right next to the casino. The Cheese Mall of Wisconsin. It's all going to be out there. The interesting thing about the whole stadium issue is, and I guess you guys can probably relate to it here in Hudson with the dog track, is that it's nothing can bring a community together like a sports team, but nothing can pull it apart like a sports team. And I think that's exactly what's happened. And the salaries are so out of whack, it's absolutely ridiculous. But I think baseball will right itself somehow. They can't continue to go on by having the Final Four teams in the baseball playoffs this year with the four highest salaries. The Yankees won with an $88 million salary cap last night. The Braves had $76 million, I think. I mean, it's totally ridiculous. You can buy a pennant, and baseball has to figure out how to right itself, or they're going to lose the game, and they're going to lose the small markets. And once you lose Middle America in baseball, you've lost it. And they're dangerously close right now to losing it. I worry about our young kids. I mean, when I was a kid, and I'm sure everybody else here can relate, I used to save baseball cards because I wanted my favorite players, and I used to read and memorize the back of the cards. Nowadays, kids buy the cards because they want to sell and make money and, get a hot rookie card and go from there. Kids used to see them out shooting baskets all the time. Now they're at the mall. Things have changed. Times have changed. Baseball and other sports has to realize that the times have changed. And they have to figure out a way to capture that next generation coming up, or we're not going to have to worry about stadiums. There won't be any stadiums to be had. But, the other thing about the stadium issue that is, so crazy, and I think the hockey team is a prime example of it. Once a team leaves, the Minneapolis-St. Paul market is big enough because it has the Hudsons and the North Dakotas and the South Dakotas, and it has the Alexandrias and the Brainers and Bemidji's and what have you, that people come down to watch games, that they will have to, it's too good a market not to have pro sports teams. It's at least a 3, if not a 4 sports team market that it can handle. With the Wild coming in, it'll be a 4 sports market until one of the teams potentially leaves. But the minute one team leaves, somebody will be on their horse trying to get a team back here because it's too good a market. And when that team comes back, it's going to cost 4 times what it costs right now to have the team here. And why people aren't seeing that, I don't know. Obviously, I've got some things at stake on the stadium. You know, if we lose the team, you know, we've lost a professional team that I can cover. But I'm also a citizen, and I think back to when Calvin Griffith died, and we pulled out all this old vintage footage of the Twins and things that happened here, and I started thinking that this is not only baseball history, this is Minnesota history. This is part of the fabric of what the community is all about. And the exposure and the sense of community that happens out of a team, you can't duplicate or replicate any other way. And if you lose that, you may lose something that just is not replaceable. So you know, I'm just hoping that cooler heads prevail and they figure out how to do something for both teams. I totally know that the owners are in it to make money, and they're millionaires already, billionaires already, and they're going to get richer with a team. No sports owner has ever lost money on a team, and they figure out a way to write things off tax-wise. Now, Carl Pohlad has not put a penny of his own money into the Minnesota Twins. I had dinner last night. I was telling Dick that I had dinner last night with Glenn Taylor and Sid Hartman at the Timberwolves game. And Sid, we made sure he had a couple extra napkins. But anyway, you know, Glenn Taylor admitted to me, he looked at the books, and that Carl Pohlad hasn't put a penny of his own money into the Twins. You know, it's you just keep borrowing against it, and then you shuffle off the losses into other businesses, and you depreciate your contracts and your players, and you know, there's a way to do it. And then all of a sudden, the team that he bought for $32 million, he sells for $120 million, you know, 12, 14 years later. You know, it's not a bad investment. So, you know, I know that's what I'd do with my $32 million if I had it. But anyway, I guess what I'd like to do is kind of open up the questions on anything related to sports, TV, Channel 5. I mean, I'm sure over here you guys get Channel 5. On cable or what? This is Channel 10? Yeah. Channel 10, make sure you folks all watch Channel 5. Yes, sir.
The score Sunday, December 20th.
The score Sunday, December, what, the Vikings?
Monday. 20th.
Good question. Boy, that's hard. I guess I would say that the Vikings will get that one back. I would think the Vikings will get that one back.
All right.
You know, Brett Favre, as amazing as he is, has 2 bad games a year in him. He's already had 1. He'll save the next one for the Dome. That's pretty much the case. By the way, I got to tell you a story about Brett Favre. You know how hard he throws that football? I worked in Green Bay for 5 years before I came here, so besides having family back there, I've got a lot of friends still in the Packer organization. And it was a couple of years ago, before the game, on a Monday night, I was talking to one of the Packer priests, of all guys. And anyway, I felt something. I'm on the sideline. I saw something out of the corner of my eye and just went back a little bit. It was a Brett Favre down and out pattern with a spiral went zipping by my head like that. It would have hit me in the temple. I would have been dead. I would have been. I'm sure I would have been. You know how hard he throws that football? And those footballs aren't soft, so I don't know if he was aiming at me or not. Yes, sir.
As a sports journalist, what do you think of the Pete Rose interview?
What do I think of the Pete Rose interview with Jim Gray? I think they should have hung Jim Gray by his toenails. For those of you who are unfamiliar with it, Jim Gray is a little smart-aleck sports reporter who they had a fantastic moment to open the World Series where they brought out the all-century team, and they brought out, you know, Hank Aaron and Willie Mays and Cal Ripken and all these greats, plus they honored the Ty Cobbs and Babe Ruths and the history of baseball. Well, Pete Rose was voted on to the all-century baseball team. It's in Atlanta. He gets a louder and longer ovation than even Hank Aaron got there because people were so happy to see Pete Rose back on a baseball field and being honored by baseball. And granted, Pete made a mistake 10 years ago by gambling on baseball. But Jim Gray got him afterwards, and instead of asking him how he felt about the ovation, how he felt about the night, what it was like to be back out in the field, he just berated him on the gambling issue and kept hammering. There's a fine line the question's got to be asked, and you got to ask the tough question. And sometimes the tough questions are pretty tough because you may be asking somebody you know fairly well a tough question, or you may also know that you're going to have to ask that person the question again. So you got to disguise it a little bit, but you have to get to the meat of it, or you're not doing your job. But to continuously hammer like that was totally uncalled for. He took away, all the momentum that had built up with that great ceremony that they had out there. I mean, it was pretty emotional. I mean, as an old baseball fan, I was like, I really enjoyed that. So, anyway, yes, sir.
Being a Viking fan, you know what this is, don't you?
No.
Well, that's a Viking fist. You know how you can tell? There's no Super Bowl ring.
Oh.
But I did have a question. I didn't mean to send you home with that, but you'll probably use that in a different way. Can you comment on the recent Gopher basketball situation?
The recent Gopher. Well, first of all, I have to tell you that I did some research on you and found out the toughest 3 years of your life were third grade. You know what? There's an old saying, never get in a smart aleck contest with a smart aleck. What do I think about the Gopher basketball situation? The only thing I know is that when I was a student, I was so dumb I had to go for basketball program write my papers. It's pretty sad. I like Clem Haskins, but I totally 100% believe he knew everything that was going on. And it's because I know Clem Haskins. Clem was a total control freak on that basketball program. He took kids' keys away for their cars. He read their odometers. He knew what they were doing. He knew who they were seeing, who they were associating with. He just had far too much control on that program not to know what was going on. And it's a shame that he felt he had to do that. Apparently, the report's it's going to say he should have known, but he has covered his base as well. He's a smart man. What the university did the other day by saying that they wouldn't accept a tournament bid this year was almost laughable because the Gophers aren't going anywhere anyway this year. They're just trying to do a preemptive strike. The sad part about the whole deal is, Clem Haskins is gone with a $1.5 million buyout. The kids that cheated and were part of the scandal are gone. The academic advisor is gone. The person who wrote the papers is gone. The kids who had nothing to do with it are the kids that are going to suffer. And that's the sad part. And, now they're trying to recruit kids to Minnesota, and everybody is using that against them. And it's tough enough to recruit as it is to not have that black cloud hanging over your head. So, yes, ma'am.
Need some advice.
Okay.
I recently got into a dangerous situation. I married a man who was a Dallas Cowboys fan. He makes me wear their clothing. It's just that I can protect myself.
It's quite simple. Just move to Texas. That or something much easier than that, dump them. Yes?
Joe, in your opinion, should Pete be allowed to go into the Hall of Fame?
Should Pete Rose be allowed to go into the Baseball Hall of Fame? That's a real tough question. I'd like to see Pete Rose in the Hall of Fame. Granted, he gambled on baseball. And to the extent he gambled on baseball, apparently is the question. If he actually gambled on his own team, he certainly knew better, and that was totally out of the realm of what he should have been doing. However, you could go down the list with Ty Cobb to Babe Ruth to other people who had bad reputations, broke laws, and did a lot of things. Darryl Strawberry has been picked up for drugs 3 times in his career, including this year, and he'll be wearing a World Series ring from last night. I believe in second chances. I think that, Pete Rose is a competitor. And the one thing that I find out with most of these guys, when I talk to kids, they always ask me about, do you ever interview Michael Jordan? I say, yeah, you ever interview? But the one thing I found out what makes all these guys a little bit special is their competitive desire. And what it tends to be is their best trait and their worst trait. because they got to win at everything. That's what makes them great, but it also hurts them on some personal levels and some business levels. And Pete Rose was one of the best competitors that baseball's ever had, and he's not going to admit his mistake, and he's going to keep fighting this thing until the end. And maybe if he showed that he was sorry, maybe it would be a little bit easier for baseball to accept it. I'd like to see him in the Hall of Fame. He's got more hits than any man ever had in the game. He deserves to be there. So, yes.
Who in the Twin Cities sports media votes for the Heisman, and who will they be voting for?
I am a Heisman voter.
Okay.
And
Who are you voting for?
why do I think this guy went to Wisconsin? Yeah, I knew that was coming. What you do is you get 3 votes. You get a first, second, and third place vote, and they'll send you clips, and so you can do your homework on the guys. It's been a strange year for Heisman. Normally there's somebody that stands right out. You know, Pete Warwick was very high on the list from the very beginning, and then of course he was thrown in jail. Makes it awfully tough to go to that award ceremony. Ron Dane, I like Ron Dane, but to be real honest with you, I went to the Wisconsin-Minnesota game, and I thought Dane was kind of wimpy that day. I know he was a little bit hurt, but I was not very impressed with his tenacity. I like Drew Brees. There's some other ones out there. I guess I haven't. Usually what I do in our office is it's always pretty good food for fodder. About the week before we do I send the vote in, we get in a lot of good arguments at work, so that's kind of fun. But Dane's definitely not out of it. You know, there's no question about that.
If he gets the record, would he move up to a closer to a 1 or 2 vote for you?
Well, I mean, he's definitely in the top 3 right now yet anyway, but I don't know. You kind of have to wait and see how it progresses. If Drew Brees had thrown a touchdown to win that game last week that Purdue was in, he would have gone to the top of my list, kind of like Doug Flutie won that one year. But I think that all the 3. That's all right. That's right. You play for the Vikings? Leroy Hord's back in the kitchen working out there. But I think all the three sports guys in town all have a vote. The college football writers have a vote, and a columnist from each newspaper have a vote from the Twin Cities. So there's a lot of votes out there. All ex-Heisman Trophy winners get a vote, so OJ gets a vote. So it's yes, sir.
Did you ever have a chance to interview Payne Stewart?
Did I ever have a chance? Yes, I did. Yes, I did. As a matter of fact, 1991 U.S. Open, Payne Stewart's a heck of a guy. 1991 U.S. Open, on Sunday night, Payne Stewart was tied for the lead that it was obviously going to be a playoff with Scott Simpson. And Payne Stewart was that close to doing sports rep with me that night. And at the end, he decided he was staying in a house close to Hazeltine, and we were going to bring the satellite truck out there and do it from the living room. And in the end, he decided that he just wouldn't feel right. He said, if it was my house, he goes, the owners aren't here. I don't feel right having to bring in the television equipment, and if something gets broken or whatever, I'm responsible. And, I, of course, said, we'll pay for it, but, I mean, it's not like college where mom and dad leave and you throw a big party, But he was very gracious. And then afterwards, when he won the tournament on Monday, Payne Stewart did a couple things that were very rare. First of all, he bought the entire press tent champagne. He went and bought like 10 bottles of champagne and put them up, and the press tent could celebrate with him. The second thing he did is he spent just a ton of time with all the little people at the course. The people who were working in the clubhouse, the pros, the grounds crew, and so forth. And he took picture after picture, and he spent time like you wouldn't believe with him. And he's just a heck of a guy. And just, that was just a sad day. Unbelievable. Matter of fact, today, 2 o'clock on ESPN, they are going to, it's the start of that tournament, and Tom Lehman's going to say a prayer, and they're sending off a bagpipe down the first fairway playing Amazing Grace. So I'm like, oh my God, so that's that'll wrench a few hearts. But he was a very popular guy, and it's very, very sad. Yes.
How far in advance before Sunday do the teams find out who the referee crew is going to be for football games? The Vikings went deep quite a bit last year, drew quite a few flags. Are they able to figure out ahead of time maybe a back judge who might be more advantageous towards throwing a flag as opposed to another?
That's a great question. I wish I knew the answer. You know what? I don't know when they find out who the crew is. I know the crew, it must be late because the crews find out about a week in advance. Bernie Kukar, who refereed the Super Bowl, is from Edina, and I've done some stuff with Bernie over the years. And Bernie basically told me that when you fly out this week to Denver, you find out on Saturday that next week you're going to be in Philadelphia. You know, so they kind of do it that way. So the crews don't find out until about a week in advance. I would imagine the coaches find out the week of. And I would think that, you know, it's very much like baseball. I know that Tom Kelly and, you know, they scout the umpires as much as they scout the players. They know what the strike zone is going to be, and they know that this is the guy who calls a pretty tight game. This is the guy that, you know, calls a high strike. This is the guy who does that. So the batters know that when they go up to the box. So, any other questions? Yes.
What's your opinion on how long Denny Green will be around?
What's my impression of Denny Green? I don't do impressions. What's my opinion? Well, I tell you, a couple years ago I wouldn't have figured too long, but yeah, I think Denny's here for a while. You know, he's got. I don't know how his job could be any better. You know, he makes, you know, $1.6 million a year. He's got basically complete control of that football team. He doesn't have the general manager title, but Denny Green's the general manager of the Vikings. He's got control of who's on that football team and who's on that football field, and he's got other people working for him to take care of, you know, the salary caps and what have you. But he's on the competition committee in the NFL, one of the head guys on that. Denny's a pretty powerful guy right now, and I just can't see him leaving. The only thing I could potentially see is if the team goes into tank, Red McComb's offering him a buyout to get the heck out of here. But you know, it is very interesting because almost every other place you go in the NFL, for a team that's had the success the Vikings have had, you know, they don't have the ring. But at the same time, they won a lot of football games. He's not a very beloved individual, and you know, he doesn't have a coach's show. You know, he doesn't. I think he's got one commercial, the first commercial he's had in years. Where if you go to Green Bay or if you go to other cities, Denver, I mean, you'll see the coaches selling cars and selling insurance and selling phone and internet and Dave Holt. So, yes. You asked one question, that's enough.
What about the Vikings and Red McComb?
You know, the first time I met you, I thought you were a hunchback, and then I found out you had your tie caught in your zipper. Okay, I'm sorry.
I'll never speak again.
That's all right. Usually when I speak, I figure I give them the speech that I'm getting paid for, you know.
Are the Vikings going to stay?
The Vikings going to stay. I think so. I think the Vikings have a much better chance of staying than the Twins do. The trouble is the Twins don't have a lot of options out there. The Vikings have some more options. But how in the world could the NFL let the Minnesota Vikings go when they're selling out every game? You know, the NFL would lose all credibility with what they're trying to accomplish. Granted, the Vikings have some problems with revenue and so forth. You know, Red McCombs has said if he's going to lose $15 million a year, he's going to lose it sleeping in his own bed, which would mean San Antonio. But with that team going down to Houston, I just don't see any way in the world the NFL would allow that team to go down to San Antonio in that market that's so close to Houston. It just wouldn't make any sense. You know, the Minnesota Vikings belong in Minnesota. That's what Red said, and I think he's right. I really don't see any way that's going to happen.
Good. The Packers need somebody to kick around.
Who's going to be the head coach for the Wild?
Who's going to be the head coach for the Wild? That's a really good question. Doug Riseborough will be the GM. I know that one. He is right now. You know, Pierre Pagé apparently doesn't want to coach. He's on the team right now as a scout, but I can't help but think Pierre Paget's got to be one of the candidates. That they're claiming he's not going to be the coach, but I think Pierre might fit that role pretty good because he's got the great relationship with Riseborough, that kind of like the McHale relationship that he has with Flip Saunders. So either that or they'll probably go. They got to get a guy who wants to build because the team is going to be pretty bad for a while. It's for 2 years they're going to get by in the fact that they brought NHL hockey back, and by the third or fourth year they want to be winning, and they realize that that's kind of the way it is. In the expansion team, you got your grace period, but when that grace period is over, you better be winning, and you can't make a lot of mistakes along the way in order to be winning in the third or fourth year. So it's a tough decision. Yes.
When is Sid Hartman going to retire?
When is Sid Hartman? You know what? I kid Sid, but Sid's 79 years old, and I think he works harder than anybody in town. I mean, he's really an amazing guy, and I like Sid, and he's fun to tease, but he's got a wealth of, he's forgotten more than most people know, including me, and he can pick up the phone and talk to these guys, and he's got a different style, the old style compared to the new style, but how can you? I mean, he loves his job. It's everything that he is, and he does it better than anybody else. I'm a little worried about him. He went to the doctor, and the doctor said, "Sid, I'm sorry, you've got two major diseases. You've got AIDS and you got Alzheimer's." And Sid goes, "Good, I thought I had AIDS." One more question, then I think we got to go. You guys got to get back to work. Yes, ma'am.
I just want to let you know that I am Sid Hartman's summertime dry cleaner. And I push his arm every time he's come in, and he's committed to coming in spring.
Well, I'll tell you what, I've seen Sid eat. You dry clean a lot of his shirts. Thank you very much. It was fun to be here.
Thank you, Joe, for your comments, and we're pleased that you came to Hudson, and we look forward to a lot of Hudson coverage on the sports tonight and on your sports wrap. I'm sure you could interview a lot of us or have us as guests, and we'd be happy to provide that for you. Hello?
I'm done now, right?
Yeah, you can get your check at the door. The next Good Morning Hudson will be held on December 7th. I want to thank the sponsors of today's program, Dave Holt Ford and Norlake, and to Mama Maria's for the great lunch. And again, please congratulate John Knutson for the Sam Walton Award. We're pleased to recognize him for that and for all that he does for our community. Again, thank you for coming, and I look forward to seeing you at upcoming events.